But if they couldn't find Bob Hope, will they find you? John Stossel with a report that may help you trace your missing money. Guess who's robbing your bank?
I wanted a new body, and the man said I could have it.
Jack LaLanne, evangelist of fitness. He built one of the first health clubs in the country and did a television show for 25 years. Now, at 67, he's a legend and still fit and on top of an empire built on strength and health. Tom Hoving with a profile of a man obsessed with fitness. Jack LaLanne. A plan for survival. Washington's new view of nuclear war that could make the unthinkable thinkable.
It would be a terrible mess. But it wouldn't be unmanageable to the extent that we had a plan.
Underground government, stockpiles of food, plenty of opium, and half of America moved to the countryside. Tom Jarriel asks, can there be life after Doomsday? Last week, in Glendale Heights, Illinois, people just like you watched 2020 and told us what they thought. Tonight, you meet them in Talk Back to 2020.
Up front tonight, could we survive a nuclear war? Well, next week is Ground Zero week to a coalition of anti-nuclear groups sponsoring meetings across America. Many people feel certain that nuclear warfare would mean the destruction of whole nations, possibly of all mankind. But others, among them officials of the White House and the Pentagon, now believe that up to 80% of us could survive with the right civil defense plan. That means up to 180 million Americans could live. About 50 million of us would die. And here with a report about this new plan in Washington is Tom Jarriel. Tom?
Hugh, by way of background, this new push for civil defense comes primarily from some leading conservatives who have argued that there is a civil defense gap, that the Russians are ahead of us. So we need to close that gap by strengthening our own civil defense. This very commitment poses another dilemma for our national leadership. If strong civil defense preparations should lead either side to believe it could survive a nuclear war, might not that very belief make war more thinkable or more likely? Well, while that riddle is being hotly debated these days, the Reagan administration has decided to press on with new civil defense plans which revive a question dating back to the early years of atomic warfare.
Attention, attention. This is an official civil defense warning. This is not a test. The United States is under nuclear attack.
What do we do in a nuclear war? We've been looking for that answer for a long time as these highly dramatized films about civil defense produced in the 50s show. These scenes have been incorporated in a new movie, The Atomic Cafe, a satire on preparations the government had in mind. The instructions told us how to duck and take cover should the sky light up.
It's a bomb. Duck and cover.
Everyone who took part still remembers.
I remembered running out into the hall and covering our heads like this, you know, and getting under the desk, and I remembered fear.
Here in the Capitol, civil defense planners have been going along for years on the theory that nuclear war meant mutually assured destruction. MAD it was called, Doomsday. But now they are making plans for life after Doomsday. These are our government's latest civil defense plans, and the Reagan administration hopes to implement them with a $4 billion budget over the next 7 years. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, through Director Giuffrida, will carry out these plans. Nuke war, as he calls it, will be messy but manageable.
It would be a mess. To suggest it wouldn't be a mess is ridiculous. It would be a terrible mess. But it wouldn't be unmanageable.
The plans are incredibly detailed, but break down into 3 key components, some of which you'll be seeing for the first time in this report. First, post-attack plans to rebuild the country following a nuclear war. Second, plans for the continuity of government, or how the leaders hope to survive so they can reestablish government from the radioactive rubble. Third, plans for the rest of us to get out of the cities to the countryside, away from the blast, in what's called crisis relocation. Let's begin with the post-attack plans, subtitled Life After Doomsday. The aftermath, whole cities in rubble, millions of casualties. The government's plan begins with burying the dead.
One of the resources that we do keep track of and are in all of our relocation plans are resources for construction equipment, such as bulldozers and backhoes and equipment that could be used to dig mass graves.
It has been said the living would envy the dead. Preparations include steps to ease the pain of injury and dying, with, of all things, opium. This is one of the biggest stashes of opium in the world, 71,000 pounds of it ready to be made into pain-killing morphine for you and me. These are the first photographs released of it, but it's not illicit. This enormous drugstore belongs to our government. In planning, heavy stress goes into the belief the American economy must survive. In the event of a nuclear attack, it's presumed the banks would be destroyed, so they have plans to take the money action underground. Down in this salt mine, 65 stories beneath the surface of Hutchinson, Kansas, is the Emergency Operating Center of the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. With their stored records, they would try to conduct business as usual. Bankers would work and live here with enough food stored for 30 days. These bankers would be linked to the computers of the National Emergency Banking Center all the way across the country. They're underground too, built into this hillside in Culpeper, Virginia. 700 million bills of various denominations are kept here to resurrect the economy. All of this planning goes into an effort which the government equates with winning on the battlefield. One pamphlet stresses, victory in a nuclear war will belong to the country that recovers first. Another vital aspect of planning for our economic recovery involves stockpiling raw materials needed to crank up the factories after an attack. $12 billion worth of precious raw materials, such as these barrels of titanium, are kept in reserve at locations like this dump outside Baltimore. It's an important part of the master plan to save the free enterprise system.
We must see that not only our people are protected, but the industrial base of our country could be in a position where it can be rapidly expanded under the protection which only an adequate civil defense program can give it.
Now, part 2 of our report, plans for the continuity of government. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. A lot of Russian missiles have this programmed in as their address. Just last month at this very location, top U.S. civilian and military planners met to stage the first nuclear war drill in over 20 years. Over 30 civilian agencies, everyone from the Agriculture Department to Justice, sent representatives to meet with FEMA and Defense Department planners to simulate a major nuclear attack on the United States. The exercise tested highly classified plans for the survival of government. 2020 has learned another war game is scheduled next month. A key installation for these war games, Mount Weather, so secret that publicly it doesn't even exist. Shown in these rare television pictures, this big bunker in the Virginia mountains is close to Washington and thus ranks as a key shelter. Below, where we could not enter, there's a whole town with a lake and 3-story buildings. Washington's top 2,000 officials would be sheltered here or at similar places. Evacuation provisions have been made for the congressional leadership, like the House Speaker, but not for the rank and file.
Well, they have a plan for the leadership, I'm sure that you're aware of. It's something that's highly privileged and confidential matter in which I wouldn't be discussed.
I think that the first nuclear explosion will probably land on this building that we're in right now. And for all intents and purposes, the government as we know it will be totally obliterated.
Obliterated? Only if you're not on the right list. The idea is that in a nuclear crisis, a few key government officials would rush to underground bunkers like these to continue to administer government for whatever's left of the United States behind steel blast-proof doors like these.
This is the FEMA Alternate National Warning Center test, Civil Defense Network test.
Inside, a skeleton staff checks communications with colleagues in similar shelters from coast to coast. Their voices can be transmitted through these blast-proof telescoping antennas, which pop up from the underground command centers as demonstrated for us beneath this farm in Olney, Maryland. Below, another specialist demonstrates how his computers will keep track of the living and dead.
Through this computer terminal, we have connected to the main computer and have simulated an attack on the United States. This shows that for the city of San Francisco, of the 3.5 million people there before the attack, it would show the 2.5 million fatalities that occurred.
In peacetime, they're largely unoccupied. It is somewhat of an eerie feeling, the absence of life in the bunker here underground. In the offices, they stand empty. The filing cabinets have no files. The trash can has no trash. The phone doesn't ring. The coat hangers, no coats. But that won't be the case in the event of an attack. Functioning from underground, the federal government will issue directives to thousands of state and local officials who have their own bomb shelters, like this one in Framingham, Massachusetts.
This is the operations room of the Emergency Operating Center. In the event of a nuclear emergency, we'd have the various departments that are assigned here. All the state agencies would be gathered here to make decisions regarding nuclear war survival.
This state bunker can sleep 300 in shifts, has decontamination showers, communications equipment, even a 2-bed refrigerated morgue.
People can be put in this until such time as we can go out into the outside world and take care of them in a normal manner.
And part 3 of our look at civil defense preparations, crisis relocation for the people. Their directions would come from the White House.
This is President Reagan. 3 of our supply aircraft have been shot down this morning.
That's not really President Reagan, of course, but a government simulation. Lou Stoddard, this communications technician, might be called upon to issue the real warning someday. That could make him the Paul Revere of the apocalypse.
I believe that it could happen, yeah. There's many people making bombs now.
A nuclear attack against the United States could occur. We can survive. It would not mean the end of the world.
This is the real thing obtained by 2020. It's been called the Doomsday tape, the government message pre-produced with a nuclear crisis in mind. Rarely, if ever shown, it may be the last television program you'll ever see, telling you what to do and where to go. It's Washington's version of Goodbye, America. It will signal crisis relocation plans for 418 cities that the Pentagon thinks are at risk to Soviet missiles. Every U.S. city with more than 50,000 people is on the hit list. There would be little hope in the event of a surprise nuclear attack, but in the event of increased international tensions, say like the Cuban Missile Crisis, 160 million people could be evacuated to safer areas, or so the planners hope. The people would be asked to bring with them food, bedding, credit cards, and shovels. By the way, they'd have to leave the pets in the car. Cambridge, Massachusetts, home of Harvard University, a high-risk area. Plans call for its residents to relocate upcountry to Greenfield, a rural, low-risk community. 2020 made the 2-hour trip up Route 2 that's been planned for the 100,000 Cambridge evacuees. They would be in Don Vetterling's hands. As Greenfield's civil defense director, he says the thought frightens him.
It's the numbers of people that are coming here that scares me. I'm very concerned about that, very concerned.
A lot of people here might be very surprised, though, to look up to the highway one day and see solid cars from here to Boston.
This is true. Solid cars on Route 2. Very true.
But Vetterling and his civil defense team will try to do all they can with hopelessly outdated and inadequate equipment. What's in these boxes?
Okay, we have some survival biscuits packed in 1954. They are in airtight steel containers. They're still good.
It's nearly 30 years ago.
It's still good because it's airtight. In fact, we still eat them. They don't taste very good, but they are not harmful, and they are, if you need to use them, they're better than nothing.
Vetterling and his staff have a plan to house the evacuees throughout Greenfield. Down the street at Sears, the address, by the way, is wrong on the plan, but it's there. There's a shelter for 1,520 in a damp basement. The assistant manager wants to be hospitable. Could the store give them a place to sleep, something to eat?
Well, we have a furniture department. We have fold-out beds, couches, and whatnot, so there would be some room, but not for 1,500.
The story was the same at the Candlelight Motel.
How do you do?
Fine. How are you?
Candlelight Motel on Mohawk?
Right.
Could you host 680 guests?
It'd be awful tight.
How many rooms do you have?
39.
Most of the folks we met in Greenfield don't know about the plan for housing 1,400 evacuees in the theater or 1,200 in this vandalized former factory. There are even plans to deliver mail to them.
In the event of a nuclear war, the cards which I have in my hand here would identify the new address or new residence of any person going to a fallout shelter or any other suitable location.
Assistant Postmaster Henry Penttala expects the mail to get through, including magazines.
Absolutely, they could. I doubt very much whether they want their magazine subscriptions, but we would certainly deliver them to them.
We asked General Giuffrida about the feasibility of all those preparations.
Well, I don't think they explained it to you adequately enough. It's not, you know, it's not a vacation.
He's seconded by T.K. Jones, a top Pentagon official, who was quoted in the Los Angeles Times as saying, "Everybody's going to make it if there are enough shovels to go around." People laughed, but it wasn't a joke. Digging in is recommended in these current films the government has produced.
Then pile 2 feet of earth on top for protection.
In terms of digging a hole to stay safe, yes, people do that very quickly. I've done that. Not in nuke war, but I've done it in wartime, and have dug very effectively with very crude instruments in order to get the maximum protection that would come from that.
Civil defense, prescription for survival, or provocation for annihilation. That's the debate in many communities.
If we can protect our people as effectively as the Soviets can protect their people, we've taken away any strategic advantage they have for launching an attack.
He's talking about a component in a strategy to fight and win a limited nuclear war. That's what this is about. And I want you to tell me why I should cooperate in your nutty schemes to blow me up.
The words of the founders of our republic haven't been left unprotected in this nuclear age. At the archives of the United States, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence can be lowered into their own bomb-proof vault. Posterity will know how we, the people of the United States, got started. The government has made sure, at least, that these founding principles will survive even doomsday.
Well, we've seen the plan. It's interesting, though, the current public thinking about this whole subject.
Yes, it is, Hugh. As you know, 2020 has commissioned a national poll and found that about 2/3 of the American people don't think the government's civil defense plans are very good. 80% don't know where they would go if the missiles were coming. And more than half are fatalistic. They think they would be killed in a nuclear attack.
Increasingly on our minds, certainly. Thank you, Tom. Later in the broadcast, we have a warning from consumer correspondent John Stossel. Your money in your bank accounts may be taken away by your bank. But next,